Hey everyone, Mariko, Realtor with Bridgewell Real Estate Group, and welcome back to the Bridgewell Group YouTube channel where I talk about all things real estate. And in today's video, I am going to be talking about how to calculate property transfer tax, but also just generals, like what is property transfer tax, who pays property transfer tax, some highlights on property transfer tax exemption. So this video is really going to be the basics for everything you need to know about property transfer tax in British Columbia, Canada. And just as an initial disclaimer, again, I am a residential realtor with my team Bridgewell Real Estate Group in the Greater Vancouver area of British Columbia, Canada, but I am not an accountant, I'm not a tax specialist, I'm not a lawyer or notary, and I'm not the government of British Columbia. So definitely just make sure that in the event that you have specific property transfer tax questions, are looking for a refund, or are in a bit of a bind with regards to PTT, that you reach out to a professional that is applicable to your situation. There is the Government of BC website, which is super helpful, and there's also contact information on there as well in the event that you are looking for information specific to an issue that you're encountering with PTT. That being said, I'm super excited to go into everything you need to know about property transfer tax. And if you haven't been to the channel before, definitely make sure to subscribe. I talk about all things real estate in the Greater Vancouver area, which is my market, but also provincially and federally for things that apply. So let's just get into it. So starting off with what is property transfer tax, this is a provincial tax, so British Columbia is where I am, that applies when you purchase or gain interest in a property. In like a residential real estate transfer situation, it is paid by the buyer. So it's not the seller that pays this, it's going to be the buyer or the one that's gaining that interest that is going to pay this property transfer tax. It is due at the completion day, also known as the registration day or the closing day. So essentially the day that the title transfers. It's not due like when you get an accepted offer, earlier, anything like that. It's due at completion. This is an amount that in the event that you are getting a mortgage cannot be blended into your mortgage. It's going to be paid in full at completion. So make sure that you have the applicable closing costs set aside to pay, say like the purchase price plus the closing costs, one of which is likely going to be property transfer tax. It is separate from other taxes such as GST, so goods and services tax is different than property transfer tax, which is what I'm talking about, and it's also known as PTT. If you ever hear that, we're talking about property transfer tax. Last but not least, it is not the same thing as property taxes. Property taxes are a completely different thing. Every home is going to have applicable property taxes. You're going to be paying that annually to the city. Whereas property transfer tax is going to be a one-time thing due at completion when you purchase or gain interest in that particular property. So getting into how to calculate property transfer tax, again, it's all based on fair market value. So let's take an example of an agreement for sale for a resale home where the seller and buyer have agreed to a certain price and it's going to complete in say 2 months. That would be a great example of fair market value. And so the property transfer tax is based on the purchase price. It's a sliding scale. So we have to do a calculation as you can see here. So the general property transfer tax for residential property, 1% of the fair market value up to and including 200K. So for the first 200K, 1% is the calculation. Then for the amount that's greater than 200, but up to 2 million, up to and including $2 million of the fair market value, that calculation is 2%. For the purchase price or like fair market value greater than $2 million, we take a calculation of 3%. So that's the general property transfer tax that we see. The government has also specified additional property transfer taxes, 2 of which I'm going to note here. So if there are properties above $3 million in fair market value, you are going to pay an additional 2% on residential properties for the portion that is above $3 million. Then there is also a foreign buyer tax. Just keep in mind that with the foreign buyer tax, at this point in time, there is also a foreign buyer ban. So I would first start with checking to see if you can actually purchase residential property at this point in time. But in the event that foreign buyers are able to do that, there is an additional 20% tax on the fair market value for foreign entities and taxable trustees. And so just to clarify, that is in addition to this general property transfer tax. So you're going to be paying the general property transfer tax plus 20% on the whole fair market value in the event that you are a tax foreign buyer. So getting into an example on how to calculate property transfer tax, let's use a number of 1.3 million. So how do we calculate this? 1% on the first 200K, that's an amount of $2,000, easy. Then we can basically take 1.3, right, minus 200K. That means that the amount that we're working with is 1.1 million for this 2% mark. So we take that number, we multiply it by 2%, and we should get 22,000. But let's double check. Yeah, 22,000. So that means that if you are dealing with a $1.3 million transfer, then you take $2,000 plus the $22,000. That's $24K in property transfer tax that is going to be due by the buyer at completion. So next I'm going to take a number that includes all of these sliding scales. So let's say that we are working with a transfer of $2.3 million. So how are we going to calculate this? We can just start by breaking down like what part of this $2.3 million is included in each section, right? So here we've got just a base of 200K. That amount's going to be multiplied by 1%, right? 202 million, that amount is going to be 1.8. 2 million minus 200K is 1.8 million. So we've got 1.8 million, right? That is going to be subject to that 2%, so 0.02, right? And then because you have a portion that's over $2 million, how much of it is that? 2.3 million minus 2 million, that's 300K. That's going to be subject to this amount at 3%. So now what we can do is just take each of these calculations and add them all up. So 200K by 1% is $2,000. 1.8 times 2% is $36,000. 300K times 3% is $9,000. So we add up 2,000 and 36,000, that is 38,000, plus 9,000 is $47,000 that you would be paying on property transfer tax at completion. The buyer would be paying this on, or in the event that you are purchasing or getting title to a $2.3 million house, and that is your full inclusion. Keep in mind there are a number of property transfer tax exemptions as well, so you'll want to check out the government website or ask your lawyer who's doing your conveyancing and title transfer if you qualify for a property transfer tax exemption. Some notable ones are definitely the first-time homebuyer property transfer tax exemption, but you and the property have to qualify. The newly built home exemption, again, you and the property need to qualify, and I have a separate video for that on how to calculate those exemptions and just talking about if you qualify, so definitely make sure to check that out. And then other ones are like family exemptions, things like that, and the government website actually is really helpful and has a big long list of all the exemptions, so I would definitely recommend looking into that if you aren't sure whether or not you are going to be paying property transfer tax. Thank you so much for watching this video on property transfer tax in British Columbia, Canada, and I hope you learned all you need to know about the topic. Again, my name is Mariko and I'm a residential realtor with my team, Bridgewell Real Estate Group, and we help people buy, sell, or invest in the Greater Vancouver and Lower Mainland, so definitely feel free to reach out to us if you are looking to make your next move in real estate. Make sure to also subscribe to the Bridgewell Group YouTube channel if you haven't already. I talk about a variety of topics, whether that be in my local market, provincially, or federally. And you can also like or comment on this video if you have questions or you are looking for me to do videos like this in the future. I would love your suggestions on what you would like to see. And last but not least, I am not a tax accountant. I'm not the government of BC. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not any of those things. So just going back to that disclaimer, I am a residential realtor. I know a lot about this topic, but if you do have particular questions that maybe you're in a bind about, or they're very specific to you, I would encourage you to reach out to those other sources, as they will likely best be able to help you. But again, I hope that you really enjoyed this video and that it was helpful, and I hope you have a really great day. Thanks so much, guys.